You never want your preaching to become stale. And one of the things that will always help you in your preaching to stay fresh is you expose yourself to the highest level of preaching.
The benefit of it is it challenges the self-awareness piece so that you can admit and identify what you are bringing, what you are laying on the text, any biases or anything that you're bringing to the text so that the text can challenge you.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Torch Podcast. We are live and on site at the 104th Hampton University Ministers Conference. This is the Hampton Ministers Conference, all right? This conference has been around for 104 years. It brings together both the life of the mind and the life of the spirit in the black community. You just got black folk all over this campus, all over. I mean, there are classrooms here. The auditorium is right behind us. Thousands of people gather to worship God, to hear some of the greatest minds in preaching and teaching, open up the Word of God, and illumine issues that will impact our community. And we're just so excited to be able to bring these podcasts live and on site. It's something you're going to be able to look forward to in the coming months, where we will go live and on site at various conferences and keep you on the cutting edge of what is going on in ministry. But I wanted to take just a few minutes to just kind of encourage you, pastors, and to help you understand the value of attending venues like this. It's not just that you're coming to attend a bunch of church services, but you're thinking about what you can be exposed to at a conference like this that's going to actually benefit and help your ministry. There's a tremendous amount of thought and planning that goes into every aspect of a conference of this magnitude. And I just believe if you haven't attended the Hampton Ministers Conference in a while, you may want to come next year. And if we get a group of MBCA pastors, we can all kind of hang out together, go to some sessions together, meet afterwards, and just process what we're hearing and how it's going to impact our lives and our ministries. We are your partner in ministry and in preaching, and we'd love to join up with you at events and venues like this to help you to be the best that you can possibly be in your preaching and in your ministry. So why should you attend the Hampton Ministers Conference? Well, number one, you should attend because you never want your preaching to become stale. And one of the things that will always help you in your preaching to stay fresh is you expose yourself to the highest level of preaching. And you get that here at the Hampton Ministers Conference. You get, and it's not about the size of these pastors' church. They bring people here who are effective, dynamic, and very spirit-filled biblical communicators. And you'll see all different sorts of styles on display here at the Hampton. But you will know for a fact that what you're getting is quality. They will challenge you in your method, in delivery, and how they carefully handle the biblical text. I mean, not only will you be fed spiritually, but as a practitioner of preaching yourself, you come to a conference like this to sharpen your skills, to think about what are some approaches you can take, what are some new models you may adopt, maybe what are some changes you may want to make to keep your preaching fresh and vibrant. And so I believe that's a big reason you need to come to the Hampton Ministers Conference. Another reason you need to come is that you don't just get preaching here, you get teaching. Okay, they bring some of the top minds. We're talking black scholars at major institutions, Howard, Virginia Union. They've had people lecturing here from Emory University, Duke, Yale, Harvard, Fuller, you name it. If you're a who's who in the Black Academy, you'll probably be on the main stage here at the Hampton Ministers Conference. And this year is no exception. Okay, they brought two great lecturers who are lecturing on various issues of homiletics and black preaching. And I tell you, it's just been phenomenal. Now, on the next one, I'm going to get into some details of some things that they've been sharing. But one of the reasons you need to come is not only are you going to hear good preaching, you're going to hear some really good teaching, and they line the lecturers up back to back. And not only do they line those lecturers up back to back in the morning, in the afternoon, they have what's called the Christian Leadership's Development Academy, CDLA. All right, now I've actually lectured for this academy. And they bring, again, some of the top preachers, pastors, and scholars to present on an array of issues. Classes are held all across the campus here at Hampton University. You can sit in there in 2-hour increments and be taught things on preaching, ministry, leadership, psychology, various mental health issues, community issues, political issues, you name it. You're going to get it at the Hampton Ministers Conference. And a third reason, and I can't say it's my favorite reason, but it's a great reason, is because I love books. Preacher, if you want to keep your preaching from getting stale, you have to keep reading. All right, and we have a great bookstore here at the conference, and I grabbed a couple of things myself. I've made 2 trips to the bookstore and got purchases both times, but the second one I got a purchase for the president, Dr. Cosby. This is not for me. But there are people who are writing. There are people who are on the cutting edge of issues, and God has called them and raised them up to put stuff in print for us to be able to carefully study, think through, and implement, whether implementation will mean a change in our preaching, a new series in our teaching, a specific focus we'll take in our ministry. But you got to study first, and you can't study if you don't know what's being written. So if you walk through the gym, you'll see there are book vendors everywhere, and they will expose you to the best and the brightest. I got a book on reconciliation and reparation, preaching economic justice. I also have a book on prophetic business, and if you come to the Congress in June in Dallas, you're going to hear a lot more about that as I'm preaching on the biblical prophets. I've also found that there is a new study Bible. It's called an Africa Study Bible. And pastors, you may want to start encouraging your people to get a Bible that pays more careful attention to the presence and the influence of persons of African descent in the Bible. Because there's a bad history of Eurocentrism in our churches, where you go in black churches and you see these pictures of white Jesus, and God is white, the angels are white, everybody in the Bible is white, in a part of the world where people have melanin in their skin, the brown-skinned people. And so what a resource like this does is it just helps to sensitize your people, to help them to understand that we have a part of biblical history as well. It's a very inexpensive, a $20 resource. And these are the kind of things attending a conference of this magnitude and of this level can expose you to. It can change your thinking. It can impact your ministry. And from there, who knows what God is going to do. And so we're just excited to be here. I'll give you a fourth one, and this one is absolutely for free. You need to come to the Hampton Ministers Conference because they got some food tents over there. You can get some fried fish, ribs, burgers, hot dogs, whatever. It's all here. You can actually stay on the campus in a dorm. Now, I don't do that. I'm a little too spoiled for that. I stay at a local hotel. But you can just get the whole experience here. And we're just excited to be able to bring this experience to you. And on my next segment, I want to share some of the things that I have heard over the course of this week in some of the main sessions that I believe is going to impact your life and your ministry. We'll be right back.
Nation.
We are live and on site on the campus of Hampton University for the 104th Ministers Conference. And I just wanted to have a few minutes to just kind of share with you some of what I've heard in the sessions that I believe may interest you. Anytime I go to a conference like this, I'm not just coming to go to church. I can do that back at home. But I come with a sense of expectancy, believing that, there's something that's going to be said or done here that God wants to expose me to, and He wants me to take this back home with me. Now, it doesn't always mean when I go home, I'm going to immediately be able to do something with it. But a lot of times when you go to a conference of this caliber, and they're bringing some of the best in preaching and teaching to the campus of Hampton University to just impart to pastors all over the country, literally all over the world, they're going to give you something to chew on. And one of the lecturers, his name is Dr. Croft. He's a homiletics professor up at Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia. And he was the first lecturer that I heard. And one of the things that he talked about, it really stuck with me. He said that we are living in a time where we are going to have to share the table of religious discourse with everybody else. Pastors, there is this defensive posture that we have gotten from white evangelicalism, where we feel that if we don't have the monopoly on the religious marketplace, that somehow it is an affront to the gospel. But what Dr. Croft gifted us with was with this idea that the genesis of the early church, Paul, Peter, the apostles, they had to go into markets where there were various religions, various deities and gods. And they didn't go down there and start fussing that these people were there. They just simply went down and made their case for who Jesus was and why Jesus makes a difference. What does it mean to say Jesus is the Christ? And so what Croft challenged African American prophetic preaching to do was to understand, yes, you are going to have to make your case along with Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, people who will never go to church again. And so what a part of the challenge of preaching today is having some humility when you are in the public square and not looking at everybody like, what are you doing here? But just simply first in how you present yourself, making sure that you understand what you have is of value. It doesn't take away from the gospel that somebody else doesn't believe it. And so that's just something that really stuck out in my mind as I was sitting there. I was like, that's actually a very, very helpful point, because I think as long as we're in this defensive posture and we don't learn how to listen and to engage with people who are in our communities, then how can we really persuade them that Jesus Christ is the way? And he ended that first lecture talking about hope. And he basically said, and I want to quote him because I want to make sure I get it right, that hope is the currency of black preaching. All right, so he talked about that, you know, hope is central and integral to what it is that we're doing in the preaching moment. And it's not this pie in the sky by and by idea and concept of hope, but it's hope in the here of now, that God is, and here's his term, God is persistent, willing to work with us. And so I left that lecture feeling very, very inspired. The second lecturer was Reverend Dr. James Harris. He is the homiletics professor right up the road at Virginia Union, one of our sister HBCUs. And what he encouraged pastors to do was to pay more attention to the concept of self-awareness. Yes, and he says that, you know, self-awareness is actually what precedes exegeting a text. Because a lot of times, preachers, there are things going on in your life. And the sub-theme of this year's conference here at Hampton is preaching forward, preaching through pain. And what Dr. Harris tries to help pastors to understand is you have to be aware of where you are in your personal life, how you are evolving as a person, and how that affects the way you see the biblical text and the way you approach the preaching task. I think sometimes when you're not paying attention to yourself and to the ways in which you are evolving, to sometimes your own personal pain, that sometimes you will allow that stuff to bleed even into how you exegete a text. So he introduced a model where you have to unread a text before you can actually read a text. And a part of the unreading of a text is dealing with your own stuff. And so sometimes coming to a conference like this gives you some space to deal with maybe something a deacon said to you or a trustee said to you that you have not resolved in your spirit, and you're bitter about it, you're upset about it, you're ruminating about it, and you're preaching against that personal issue, and it's bleeding into how you even see the biblical text. And so it's just great that you can come to a conference like this and just unpack those things and just take inventory of yourself and your preaching. I have been blessed all week long, and I just wanted to share those two insights with you. The preaching and the teaching, it has been life-changing, and I hope to see you come here at the Hampton Ministers Conference in the near future. We'll be right back.
Hey, I'm Reverend Dr. Jeffrey A. Gladney, pastor of Red Oak Grove Missionary Baptist Church, and you're watching The Torch. Stay tuned.
We are live and on site at the campus of Hampton University at the 104th Ministers Conference. Look who I bumped into at the Hampton Ministers Conference. Dr. F. Bruce Williams, pastor of the Bates Memorial Missionary Baptist Church in Louisville, a board member of Simmons College of Kentucky, one of the great preachers in our church. And so, you know, I told him, hey, we're going to be down here and we'd love for you to stop by and to share with us. And so, Dr. Williams, welcome to The Torch.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on The Torch. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so one of the things we're interested in, you know, kind of getting your reflections on, I did one segment just encouraging them to attend a conference like this and how it can really help pastors to sharpen their focus, to hone their skills, and to take something from the conference that they can actually, you know, strengthen their preaching, help them in their ministries. And so, why do you come to the Hampton Ministers Conference?
For that reason. One of the strong points about it is the variety it has. There's a musical component that we usually as preachers we don't talk about, but there's the musical component of the Hampton Conference that's very enriching, because it offers, unlike some conferences, it offers a variety of music and offers a challenge to do all of it well. So whether it's contemporary or whether it's old school gospel or whether it's anthems and hymns, they do a variety of it here, and they not only teach it and encourage it, and they have some of the best clinicians, but they also model it in the worship experience, so you don't get one kind of music. I like them all, but variety is important for a number of reasons, and I think churches that are trying to move forward and even trying to reach millennials and Zs as well, Generation Z, should also reach back to our traditional hymns and etc. And they could come to a place like this and see how it's done well, as well as the other contemporary. So I think the music component is important. Then I think aside from being a place where some of the greatest preachers on the globe are invited to preach, they also invite some of the greatest minds to lecture.
Yes.
And some of the strong points of this conference has been its lectures, and some of the people you get exposed to that perhaps you would never hear about, but because they have one foot in the pastorate and one in the academy, which is a good mix, by the way.
Good balance, yeah.
So they bring a very rich perspective in terms of lecturing, and they really do lecture, although they always add a little gravy at the end. But they really do lecture, and it is this. There have been some enriching and really profound presentations, and if you're a young preacher, you should really come to see that and more, but certainly to see the importance of having form and not just substance.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, substance and not just form is what I mean.
Yeah.
Substance and not just form. And so I think it's important that they come and see and hear and be challenged and stretched. And you don't get that at most every conference. And in many ways, this conference too is a conference where you can come and get some things that are ahead of you. So you can come and actually bring some things back. We have to remember that the average church is 250 people. So, most people think, well, if I come to this, I'm not going to bring anything back. No, at this conference you will.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the Hampton Conference is, how it bridges the great black preaching tradition with the black intellectual tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see some of these black academicians on the main stage. They can get into some technicalities, but then they will demonstrate that they are a product of the black church.
Right, right.
Dr. Croft closed his lecture.
My God.
That's not something you see at every conference.
Right.
So that real unique blend. I like to get your reflections on Dr. James Harris. He was one of the lecturers. Mm-hmm. He's actually both a pastor and a homiletics professor up at Virginia Union. And he actually introduced a new hermeneutical model that pastors should consider, one that unreads a text before you actually read a text. Mm-hmm. And he introduced this concept of self-understanding as a lifelong process, that before you even exegete a text, you have to do personal exegesis. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that concept that's something I'm going to be taking home and continuing to chew on. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes as pastors, we're just quick to kind of get to the text, and we're not always aware of what we're bringing to the text and where we are in our personal lives and how it affects what we see in the text and how we go about preaching.
Right.
What did you think about that?
Well, I thought that was an excellent model. I've never heard it said the way he said it. I think he mentioned reading and then unreading. And then he inserted the part of self-awareness, because I was looking for some clarity to know exactly what he meant. Yeah. And I thought it's an extremely useful model. I suppose people who read the Bible and pastors who read the Bible devotionally as well as, can benefit from the transformative power of the word that they are preaching to others. So I don't know whether some people do that unconsciously at times or not. The benefit of him is he actually points it out, identifies it, and labels it so that people can know that they're doing it, and that people who are not consciously doing it can begin to consciously do it. The benefit of it, obviously, I say obviously, but the benefit of it is it challenges the self-awareness piece so that you can admit and identify what you are bringing, what you are laying on the text, any biases or anything that you're bringing to the text, so that the text can challenge you. You know, we often talk about being critical of the text, and you should bring a critical mind to the text. You should ask questions of the text. But it's important to bring a critical mind to yourself and ask questions to yourself, and let the text critique you as well. And so I think that was important. I think it's important for a number of reasons. One, as it relates to issues of gender, as it relates to issues of race, and what biases we are bringing to the text and making the text fit our biases rather than letting the text challenge our own biases. And I think, given the present climate in our country in terms of, more specifically, for example, just one example, racism, and the challenges that Southern Baptists might be having in their own convention about that issue, is an important part of this critical piece, because historically things like racism, white supremacy, for example, as an overall umbrella, it has gotten its theological underpinnings from the church, which is an example of the church not being critical about its own biases, the white church. So I think it's an exciting way of looking at the text and consciously approaching sermon preparation and your own devotional life.
What did you think about the conference theme, this idea of preaching forward and preaching through pain?
Wow. Well, you have a book out on clergy suicide.
Yes.
And when I read your book, and it was an excellent book, by the way, I read your book, I wasn't aware of that as being such an epidemic as it is. I knew there's, as a pastor, I knew there were clergy pressures, and I know about and I had heard and read and saw and know about clergy's death because of health issues and some suicides, but I didn't know the extent to which it was happening. So to talk about preaching through pain opened the discussion to be able to talk about issues that have been and remove the stigma of clergy depression, the need for therapy. One of them brought out how he was not only therapy but medication, the fact that he was now on medication, how it helped him through. And so kind of removing those stigmas in an open forum, one of the largest ones for African American pastors in the world, to openly talk about it and be as transparent about those issues, that I think it's priceless. And I think, so I liked the forward preaching forward, but I really did like preaching through the pain, so that they could identify the pain, consciously call it what it is, and then begin to talk about how can we engage in self-care.
I really liked it because I found it to be a very interesting juxtaposition between wanting to be pastoral with pastors, but also connecting with social justice issues that affect the condition of clergy in our communities. So that's why I really see there's a great value here at this conference, that it's a very sophisticated level of engagement. And pastors, I think you'll be blessed and strengthened in your ministries if you come. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity.
During the last year of his life, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put justice for the poor and working class people at the center of his agenda.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land.
Dr. King launched his Poor People's Campaign, demanding that Congress shift the country's spending from war to health care, housing, jobs, and education.
Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Dr. King worked relentlessly to open the eyes of white America to the injustices of black people.
For Negro poverty is not white poverty.
Here, President Lyndon Johnson shares with the student body of Howard at their commencement.
But there are differences. These differences are not racial differences. They are solely and simply the consequence of ancient brutality, past injustice, and present prejudice. For the Negro, they are a constant reminder of oppression. For the white, they are a constant reminder of guilt.
Dr. King realized that black America was stuck at the bottom of an American caste system caused by centuries of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and segregation.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you.
Dr. King was assassinated trying to institute changes to prevent blacks from becoming a permanent underclass in America. Today, we celebrate successful African Americans who often cover and deflect the tragic reality of black America. Much of their success does nothing to dispel the myth of post-racial America. It simply masks the truth that black America is still on a downward spiral.
These are proud and impressive achievements. But for the great majority of Negro Americans, the poor, the unemployed, the uprooted, and the dispossessed, there's a much grimmer story.
A recent article by the Daily News explains it would take 228 years for black families to amass the wealth of white families, and that by the year 2053, the median black wealth will fall to zero if things do not change. Simmons College of Kentucky, in conjunction with the National Baptist Convention of America International, the Progressive National Baptist Convention, and the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, present the Angela Project 2018 Conference, Friday and Saturday, September 14th and 15th at St. Stephen Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. 3 national conventions coming together to advance public policy and set America on a new trajectory for the advancement of black America. Join us for this 2-day conference beginning Friday, September 14th at 1 p.m. and continuing Saturday, September 15th at 9 p.m. Our focus, the illusion of inclusion. 50 years of downward mobility in black America with special guest presenters. Dietrich Asante Muhammad, Senior Fellow for the Racial Wealth Divide at Prosperity Now. Yvette Carnell, Social Analyst and founder of BreakingBrown.com. Antonio Moore, attorney, social analyst, and Emmy-nominated producer. Reverend Joe Phelps, co-chairman of Empower West Louisville. Dr. Kevin Cosby, president of Simmons College of Kentucky, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder and president of Push Coalition. Social justice icon Reverend Jesse Jackson will be our keynote speaker and will also be honored for 50 years of continuing the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's the Angela Project 2018 Conference, hosted by Simmons College of Kentucky. For more information, give us a call at 502-776-1443 or give us a click at simmonscollegeky.edu.
Welcome back to the Torch Podcast, live and on site at the Hampton Ministers Conference here in Hampton, Virginia. I bumped into Reverend Dr. F. Bruce Williams, the pastor of Bates, We've just been spending some time talking about the conference theme, which has been dealing with the issue of preaching through pain. And one of the things I found to be very, very helpful about the conference is that, the Hampton Conference, when it's at its best, it does social justice preaching. So I've been hearing about African American prophetic preaching for years, and a lot of what I hear is coming from this conference. So the best main stage preachers and teachers invariably address some theme of African American prophetic preaching, the kind of preaching that addresses, pastoral issues, but also systemic, social, economic issues. And so this whole theme of pain has both a personal and a systemic dimension to it. And I heard some of that coming through in the presentations and just thought that was very helpful.
Yeah, I think the priestly prophetic two-wing ministry approach is good. And we were talking about it earlier about this issue, how it relates to the issue of clergy care.
Yes. And
usually when you think of clergy care, health, and then dealing with the stress of pastoring and the challenges of personal marriages, if you're married, family life, and trying to balance those. But you don't hear a lot about clergy care as it relates to their participation in addressing issues of white supremacy, racism, and how it affects the people, because oftentimes they're involved in one way or another, in some dimension or another, in the struggle for justice, and we forget about how it affects them.
Yes.
That is, they're, and often the community is looking to clergy to help participate in leadership in addressing these issues, but have not really spoken to these clergy about caring about themselves. And I don't think community or churches mean any harm by that, but they don't think about your care. They think about your place in the struggle and what you need to do to help promote justice, but they don't really think about caring about you.
Wow.
And so clergy have to be conscious about finding space for themselves to talk through therapeutically about their own struggles with being black themselves. While they're struggling to help other black people, they have to deal with the micro and macro aggressions, etc., and may have to deal with it in different ways. So I think this conference really helps as a especially housed here at an HBCU.
Well, speaking of an HBCU, we're on the campus of Hampton University. And this Ministers Conference has been on this campus for 104 years. It is just one of many examples of the unique relationship HBCUs have with black churches. It's the same model we have at Simmons College of Kentucky. It's a relationship we have with the National Baptist Convention of America. This kind of synergy between education and the church is the backbone of the black community. And so you're a product of an HBCU.
Right.
What do you think about this relationship you see on this campus between the black church?
Well, I think it mirrors a lot of ways of what we're doing at Simmons. And one of the great advantages we've already mentioned is the marriage between the academy and the church.
Yes.
And one of the, and which is of course one of the things we're seeking to do and are doing at Simmons. And what has been really unique about this setting, aside from the fact that it houses one of the greatest, largest, interdenominational gathering of clergymen and women in the world, is that you hear from not only the academy or the church, but you hear from people who are both in the academy and the church, either as working clergy in the church or as pastors. And I think, it's one thing to be in the academy talking to the church, or in the church talking to the academy, but when you're in both and you're talking, then clergy can hear you if you're in the clergy, you're clergy in the church as well as the academy. They can hear you. And the academy can hear you if you're not only in the church, but you're also a part of the academy. And I think we bring the best of our tradition to of the black community when the head and heart hold hands and collaboratively work together in bringing our best. It also adds, I might add, as a corrective. It adds, I think, a restoration to our tradition of prophetic preaching.
Yes.
When you are rooted in the academy, because it helps us look back and remind ourselves how we brought the best of both academy, priestly and prophetic preaching to the tradition of the black church.
I couldn't have said that better myself. This is why we love Dr. Samuel Tolbert, Dr. Kevin Cosby, and the relationship that God has birthed through them. We love Simmons and MBCA coming together. We love Hampton University and this Ministers Conference. And just thank God for all that God is doing through Simmons and through this Torch podcast. Thanks so much for stopping by to share with us.
It's been a joy. It always is a joy.
Yeah,
It's always is a joy.
Absolutely. Well, that's our time for now. We want to thank Reverend Dr. F. Bruce Williams for stopping by and sharing with us. You do not want to miss next week's episode. We're going to be interviewing Micah Gaines, an up-and-coming minister out of Lexington, Kentucky, as well as Reverend Dr. Mulrain, who has written an exciting book for black men. I'll see you next time on The Torch.